According to the life milestones, we should all start to feel pretty stable, resilient, and self-satisfied in our 30s and 40s. Anchored down in a relationship, maybe having a family, owning a property, in a stable job, etc., etc. But the reality is that this is when a lot of people start to feel incredibly lost. If that's you, then this episode is going to give you a new perspective on where you might be in your life right now that will give you more freedom and also some tangible next steps. Hello and welcome to Notes on Vulnerability. My name is Alex and I'm the resilience coach. And I'm here to help you find freedom from whatever is keeping you stuck right now so that you can actually thrive at life. I work with the mind and the nervous system to make changing your life feel really simple and really fucking satisfying. This is season 4 of Notes on Vulnerability, in which you will find some fantastic interviews with really inspiring people, as well as shorter episodes like this one, which is me sharing insights and ideas that I think are really useful to know right now. Because something that I have learned as a resilience coach is that we often just make our lives so much harder than they really need to be. And this identity crisis that often hits in your 30s and 40s, if not tackled, can really derail your life until you do tackle it. So where does this identity crisis actually come from? Those pesky little life milestones definitely have a big part to play in this. You know, if you've not hit them by a certain age, it can leave you feeling like a bit of a failure. But sometimes there's no obvious reason. There's no obvious crisis and everything looks fine. Maybe you even feel quite successful. And yet something feels off. That's the experience that a lot of people have, where they just cannot pinpoint where this is coming from. The first thing I want to say about those life milestones is that they are outdated. I think a lot of us know this on a conscious level, but we end up kind of still pursuing them subconsciously because that's what we were programmed to do, or we're judging ourselves for not reaching them and not noticing that that's what we're doing. How much of your view of a successful life is defined by this idea that you need a property, some kind of relationship status, money, and, you know, to have created another generation? Probably more than you realize, because this messaging is everywhere. It is deeply ingrained in culture, religion, politics, families. You know, almost every book or film with a happy ending is the guy or the girl getting the guy or the girl. And maybe there's a pregnancy announcement at the end too. I've also mentioned the life milestones in almost every episode I've recorded because I don't think that this kind of programming is without harm. For so many of my clients, for example, it acts like a prison. It generates a lot of shame and anxiety and fear, and it blocks your view of what's actually possible for you until you really tear down the walls. But I think a lot of us are afraid of doing that. And I think that comes from, you know, this perception that the people who aren't living in alignment with the life milestones are often portrayed as sad or evil or pitiable, such as single women with cats. Often that's what stops us really looking outside of these weirdly manufactured goalposts to define our lives. And again, that fear might be so deeply ingrained that you're not really conscious of it and you just think it's the truth. But even people who have achieved these life milestones, who have ticked some or all of them off, can still feel very restless or flat, or kind of have this low-grade sense of like, is this all there is? Usually that's followed by feeling very guilty for being ungrateful, or even having the thoughts in the first place. That's certainly what I've observed in a lot of my coaching clients, both men and women. You know, this is when the motion of your 20s tends to slow down. Most of us spend our 20s in a mad rush of coping or proving or adapting or becoming or building. You know, we're learning how to survive in the world, essentially, how to get where we're trying to go, how to deal with the shit from our childhood. We're learning how to connect to the people that we want to connect with. And all of it works until you start to slow down a little bit. And when that chaotic motion eases, even just a little bit, that is when you have the space to really notice yourself and what's happening inside of you, which sounds like a good thing. It isn't always, because if there isn't really anything inside, that's what can leave you feeling very empty. At the same time, those life milestones, they tend to kind of slow down, or you've reached a few of them, or the life milestones just stop landing in the same way, or they show themselves to be what they are, which is empty promises. And as a result of all of this, suddenly what can happen is that the thing that you are hearing the loudest in your head is, who am I when I'm not coping, fixing, achieving, holding it all together, or defined by the roles that I currently play in life? This can feel incredibly confusing when there is no obvious reason for unhappiness. such as a breakup or a breakdown or grief or some other catastrophe. And that's why so many of us respond to this feeling of being a bit lost by assuming that we are the problem, like it's some kind of character flaw, when actually it's just a response, it's just data. And it's often a response to just simply never having discovered who you actually are. We all build identities for ourselves, and in our 20s, these are heavily influenced by our families, by culture, and those life milestones. So we tend to lean towards identities where we are needed, where we are reliable, where we are strong and capable, where we are achieving, where we are spinning plates, where we are kind of doing what society perceives to be a successful life. These identities can get really entrenched because we win praise for being like this, and they appear to give our lives momentum. We feel like as a result of this, we're building a good-looking life, from the outside at least, one that compares well to others. But there is a big cost to this kind of identity, because if you've invested all of your time and energy into creating an identity that is defined by what is required of you or what others would approve of or be impressed by, there's going to come a point where you just lose track of what's actually true for you, until one day your life just feels completely unfamiliar to the real you. It's this tension between attachment and authenticity. In order to get the attachments that you want in life or that you feel like you deserve, the sacrifice is the authenticity. That is not a sacrifice that many of us can make without consequences for very long. Just look at the number one regret of the dying. I wish I'd had the courage to live a life true to myself and not the life that others expected of me. That is the number one regret of the dying. Not I wish I'd had more money or more children or worked more. I wish I had been truer to myself. I think when you reach your 30s or 40s, identity fatigue is the problem. Lots of people get into this situation and blame themselves for a lack of direction. It's something I see all the time in coaching. But it's identity fatigue that is the issue here. And this is the time in life, especially for perimenopausal women, when your nervous system starts pushing back as well. Suddenly you're going to feel a lot more resistance to performing, to being okay or fine all the time, to suppressing or ignoring emotions instead of feeling them. You will no longer get the same hit from putting everyone else's needs first and taking responsibility for everyone and everything. That old, reliable, strong, coping identity starts to feel stale and much more like a dead weight than some kind of crown. The lived experience of identity fatigue is to totally lose clarity on you and on your life. Decisions start to feel very heavy with very big consequences. Confidence is on very shaky ground, so even the smallest choices that you need to make become very challenging. What's actually happening is that your coping strategies are wearing thin, like the tyres on a car that haven't been replaced for a very long time. And that is why it no longer feels like there's anything between you and the tarmac. So what's the solution? Well, I think it's authenticity, which is why I include this as one of my pillars of resilience in resilience coaching, because there comes a point where it is critical to not just how we survive, but how we thrive at life, to know who we are. And that point for a lot of us is going to be in our 30s or 40s. This lost, dissatisfied, restless feeling is something that we can interpret as a failure or a lack of gratitude, but it's actually just a giant flashing sign that you need to invest some time and energy and resources in authenticity, the kind of authenticity that we work on in resilience coaching, which is rooted in who you actually are. Building resilience at this stage in your life creates quite a profound shift. There are a few things that give you the ability to surf the waves of life with more confidence than knowing exactly who you are. So here's a little test. Can you answer the question, who are you? And the caveat here is to do this without referencing your job title, your relationship status, or any of the roles that you play in life. If you can't answer that question, then there is a gap in your self-knowledge that needs to be filled with authenticity. And if that gap exists for you, it's likely currently being filled by things like self-doubt, anxiety, and feeling very lost. That lost feeling is a sign that it's time for a transition. It's time to start doing something differently, to move on from stuff. This doesn't have to be dramatic or kind of cinematic in any way. It's more about a slow internal change, moving away from all the things that you kind of constructed around yourself over the years in your 20s to survive or to grow, away from that false identity of reliability or capability or achievement. It's the kind of transition where your nervous system basically stops finding safety in those old roles and starts asking for something a lot more honest from you, a lot more sustainable for the rest of your life. Building resilience at this point is where a subtle shift takes place. It's not like waking up with some kind of brand new purpose. It's about having more headspace to handle what drains you and being able to stop defaulting to who you've been up until now and actually explore who you really are. Once we get authenticity in the mix, you can start to feel much more confident about decisions. They feel less frantic. Boundaries are obvious and doable. Emotions can pass through instead of kind of taking over. And there is a growing sense of, I can handle this, and a feeling of contentment rather than a constant feeling that something needs fixing. And this really works. A lot of my clients end up saying, I feel more like myself again after resilience coaching. But what they usually mean is, I actually see who I am now, so I feel anchored in my life instead of just floating through it. And that happens because we've created clarity on identity, let go of the old ones, and also created safety for the nervous system, which means the mind can be clear. It's not constantly trying to work out what's wrong with you. And it becomes possible to actually hear yourself again, to trust your internal signals, your intuition, your gut instincts, and to not need to justify every single choice that you make with either logic or productivity. Once you become more authentic, you make decisions because they actually work for you, because you know what works for you, not because they might impress other people or because they might hit those life milestones. Most importantly, that constant internal question of, what's wrong with me? Why aren't I happy? Why aren't I grateful? That begins to fade. Outgrowing old versions of yourself is painful. Let's not pretend that it's not, but it is part of life. And it's very necessary to do that because those old versions of us may have kept us safe, but they also keep us trapped. And what we need, instead of clinging to what worked in our 20s, is to develop the strength to stay present in the uncertainty of kind of getting older without immediately trying to outrun that uncertainty. Because life tends to change a lot in your 30s and 40s, especially, if you're a woman going through pregnancy or perimenopause or menopause. And identity shifts come with all of those. Being able to sit with the uncertainty to ride those waves of change. That comes directly from resilience, from how much authenticity you have and the connection you have to you. And it will give you permission in those moments to pause, because you will know that not everything that's happening or causing discomfort needs to be solved right away. Not every question that you're experiencing needs an answer right now. And you will find that you start to trust your next steps instead of constantly fearing that you are falling behind other people and getting stuck in comparison. A big point here is that all of this isn't about becoming someone different. It's about settling into who you really are, probably who you've always been underneath all the layers that we tend to add throughout life as we're going through kind of childhood, teenage years, and then our 20s. This is about plugging into the kind of power and the potential and the safety that the authentic version of you really creates. That's why that feeling of lostness can be a pivotal moment, as long as you don't try to numb it or suppress it or ignore it. It's just a sign that you are ready to start doing things differently. So although experiencing an identity crisis in your 30s or 40s might seem like a bleak moment, it's really just shattering all the scaffolding that you pile up around yourself in those earlier years that is probably blocking the real you from being seen and experienced. It's blocking the power that you could actually have by tapping into your authentic self. You're probably getting a sign that you are actually ready to plug into who you really are, to throw off all of the social conditioning that you've been living your life by, all of the rules, and be your most authentic self. Authenticity is powerful because it brings a sense of ease to your life that you may not have felt while you were living without it. It's an incredible shift to make, and if you're listening to this, it sounds like you're probably ready to make it. Hopefully that has been a helpful insight into why you might be feeling this kind of sense of crisis around your identity right now. Authenticity and identity work are a big part of what I do as a resilience coach. So if you would like some help with this, book a free intro call with me. The link is in the show notes. You can also come find me on Instagram at Alex Resilience Coach and online at shore-coaching.com. And don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss any of the upcoming episodes.
Resilience isn't about avoiding stress, it's about meeting it with strength. This adaptogenic trio is called our chill mix for a reason. Our award-winning Calm and Collected formula is a favourite among people with busy, anxious brains. I have combined lion's mane, ashwagandha and holy basil with sea greens to ease your racing mind and calm a jittery body. Consistency is key when it comes to adaptogens, so make Calm and Collected part of your evening ritual for calm, resilience and rest.